Hello, everyone, and welcome into the 30th episode of Jack's Mailbag, the series where I answer your Gamecock athletics questions. If you have a question or topic you want answered on next week's episode, be sure to drop a comment in the comment section below on this YouTube video, or I'll have a post on the Insiders Forum on GamecockCentral.com where you can ask any and all of your questions that you may have for me. This week, we're going to be talking primarily about South Carolina football and kind of what I thought happened and went wrong in that loss to Ole Miss over the weekend. So without further ado, let's get into our first question of the week, which isn't even really a football question, but still a question that's a good one to answer nonetheless. And it comes from R. Zanke, who asks, how did you end up covering USC? Yeah, so great question. And I'm sure it's one that a lot of people are curious about if you don't really know much about me and what I do. So, I went and graduated from USC, University of South Carolina, back in December of 2022. Went to school there for 3.5 years before that. It took me 4.5 years to graduate from college, but my first year I went to the University of South Carolina, the Bridge School in Beaufort. So USCB, go Sand Sharks, I guess. So that was a great first year of college. Then I transferred over to South Carolina and ended up graduating in 3.5 years after that. So great time in college. And so the question is, how did I end up covering USC? So back in school, when I first started out at South Carolina in my sophomore year, I got involved with the student newspaper there and did that for, I think, maybe 6 semesters. So including a summer where I was the sports editor for a summer. So covered a lot of USC athletics that way. I remember my first event I covered, I think, was like a women's soccer game or something against Alabama. Maybe it was men's soccer. It was soccer, but that was a long time ago. And then I really branched out, covered a lot of baseball, softball, football, obviously, basketball. And so going into what was going to be my final semester of college in fall 2022, leading into the summer, I had figured out that I was going to be doing sports editor for the student newspaper at South Carolina. And that was really awesome. That was going to be a cool experience to finally get some editing experience in college. But at the same time, I was looking for an internship because I mean, I don't think it's required at USC to graduate with an internship, specifically in journalism. But nevertheless, I still felt like I kind of needed some of that real world experience. And that's not to say working at a student newspaper wasn't going to give me that, because, going, covering games and stuff and being around full-time journalists and stuff that have done this stuff for years, it gets you some of that experience. But working for a newspaper or an established website is kind of a whole different ballgame. So I think going into maybe the spring or right before the summer, I was looking for internships and stuff. I reached out to any of the local papers here and websites and stuff that you could think of. I remember this specifically, and I think I reached out to Shoe sometime in the spring. I hadn't heard back for weeks, and I got an email like a month later about a potential internship position and hit it off, and eventually started working as an intern going into that summer and while doing sports editing and all that. That was great. And then I think after I graduated from USC in that December month of 2022, I eventually moved into a part-time role where I was doing teaching on the side and stuff, and still doing some freelancing stuff back home in Fort Mill, covering high school sports. So that was great and all. And then I'll never forget this. I think it was a part-time role at the Rock Hill Herald. And I think literally maybe like a week into the job, I figured out that someone was leaving from Gamecock Central, Colin Taylor, who my mentor and one of my good friends and stuff at Gamecock Central. He was leaving and going to take a role at the university. So that kind of opened up a door for me, and I ended up becoming a full-time staff writer at Gamecock Central last October. I'm coming up very soon here on the 1-year anniversary. I can't remember the specific date. I think it's like a week from now. Maybe at the time of recording this, it's October 8th. So I think whenever you see this, the anniversary will or won't have already passed. So it's a really cool thing to have been doing this full-time at Gamecock Central for now just about a year. And it's really great, and I love doing it. I love covering the school that I went to and graduated from, and it's a really cool opportunity because I didn't grow up a Gamecock fan or anything. I didn't grow up around this, and going to school here, I kind of quickly learned that this is a big deal, these sports here and stuff. Win or lose, it's really cool being a part of this and getting to cover all these different teams, men's basketball, baseball, football. I really am grateful to do what I do, and it's awesome. So I love doing it, and I'm super happy with the job I'm in now. I get to do radio and stuff. I get to do all these live shows. I get to talk to you guys. I'm on my 30th episode of doing Jack's Mailbag. That's pretty wild, to be honest. And I can't wait till we get to 50 and hopefully 100 and stuff. So super thankful for you guys and all the support you give me since I've started here at Gamecock Central just about 2.5 years ago now. So anyway, let's get into our next question from KCock93, who asks a more football related question. The rest of these questions from here on out are more football centric. Who is our fear coach on staff? And in quotations, fear coach. Where in the team handbook does it outline punishments for stupid infractions, i.e., shotgun motion after a tackle for a loss or lining up offsides again defensively? Is there any accountability, stadium stairs, gassers, etc.? I know that they don't get pulled out of the game for this per firsthand witnessing. Yeah, so this question is a complicated one, but it's in reference to all the penalties that South Carolina had against Ole Miss. And in case you missed it, didn't watch the game, the Gamecocks did have 4 offsides penalties on defense, all of which came on third down. And 3 of them were accepted. 1 of them was declined, but still 4 is 4 nonetheless. And then it was, I think in the third quarter, it was a 3rd and 6 play. Dylan Stort sacked Jackson Dart, Ole Miss's quarterback. And as Dart was on the ground and Stort got up, he with his hands, he did like an imaginary gun shooting Dart, and the refs threw a flag, and he got called for unsportsmanlike conduct. And apparently it happened again in the game somewhere, but I don't remember seeing that, but I've heard about it. But either way, these are such, and honest, I'll be frank, they're stupid penalties. Like, they're not stupid in the fact of like, why are you throwing it, ref? It's more like South Carolina is killing themselves with these, honestly, just moronic penalties. Like, they got to be smarter than that. And jumping off sides is one thing. Like, if it happens once or twice, like, okay, it's not a big deal. But it happens over and over again. And that's the issue I think a lot of people have, is that it happened 4 times against Ole Miss. You didn't learn from your mistakes the first time. And then the shotgun thing is just an ill-advised decision made by Dylan Stort. And yeah, he's a freshman and stuff. It happens. I'm sure internally South Carolina's kind of handled it and how to go about it. But I just think it's stuff like this that can drive you nuts, and you gotta be better than that. Now, as for what they do as punishment, I truthfully have no idea. Again, we're not at practice or anything during the season, so we don't have any firsthand eyewitness type stuff here to really say what does or doesn't happen. I got to imagine there's some sort of punishment in terms of running extra or whatever the case might be, just like any football team. If you've ever played football, I mean, you know that punishments like running gassers and stuff. I remember doing that stuff back in high school when I played football. So I can only imagine what it's like at the college level. And these penalties just keep happening. And the issue I have is the coaches say week after week. I mean, you can go back and listen to any of Shane Beamer's press conferences or whatever, or the players. They keep saying they got to be better, and we're going to coach them better, and the coaching wasn't good enough, and these penalties keep happening, and they do. It's like they say every week. It's rinse and repeat. And I'm not trying to dog on anyone, but it's like you keep saying that you're going to be better from this, and you're going to learn from these mistakes, and these are teachable moments and stuff. But it keeps happening over and over again. It seems like every game, and it's not by coincidence. South Carolina is probably one of the top teams in the country in terms of penalties, and they're going to finish with a lot of penalties by the end of the year. I can assure you, if it hasn't changed now, I don't know when it will, but it's like these penalties just keep happening and nothing seems to really change. So I don't know what goes on in practice. So it's tough to say. But again, my point is the penalties are getting ridiculous and they keep coming in big numbers. 8 against Ole Miss is not good enough, especially against a team that is highly penalized, probably more so than South Carolina. And you made a lot of dumb mistakes. You got to move on and try your best to limit them next time out against Alabama. Next question is another long one, so I'm going to try to break this up as best as I can. It comes from F.A. Doccock, who asks, what would your argument be to support the program is better off today than it was on October 6th, 2019? For reference, that was Will Muschamp's 4th year and was through 5 weeks in the season. His overall record was 24-20 and was coming off a win versus Kentucky and was about to go on the road to Athens in a game most believed he'd lose but one. Beamer is currently 23-20 and about to go on the road to play a game most believe he'll lose. Recruiting was going well with Marshawn Lloyd, Boogie Huntley, Mo Kaba, Luke Doty, and other 4 stars in the fold, with Jordan Birch looking good. Or do you feel like there's not much difference in where we were then and where we are today? So I will say that is an interesting point. I didn't think about that. It's kind of similar in a lot of ways, to be honest. Look, I've seen the comparisons out there. The records between Will Muschamp, who was the previous head coach before Shane Beamer, and now Beamer's record are very, very similar. I will say they are similar because recruiting wise, Muschamp did a pretty good job bringing in a lot of, eventual NFL talent and stuff like Debo Samuel, Javon Kinlaw, guys like that. But with Beamer, it's also similar because he's doing a great job recruiting now as well. And obviously, he landed Nick Harbor, a 5-star athlete and stuff. Over the weekend here, got guys like Malik Clark and other 4 stars. Jordan Gidron decided to reclassify and commit early to South Carolina for next year. So Beamer's doing a great job on the recruiting trail, in my opinion. However, the results on the field are so-so. Outside of the wins against 2022, he had the wins against Tennessee and Clemson in back-to-back weeks, and then he had the win in the Mayo Bowl against North Carolina in his first season. Other than that, I can't really put my finger on. And he beat Kentucky by 25 points this year, and he's had 3 straight wins over Kentucky. But other than that, I can't really put my finger on like anything like monumental Beamer's done, right? He's had 2 of the best wins in program history, no doubt. Like those wins against Tennessee and Clemson, massive. But it didn't really shift the needle at all in terms of the program. Like last season, right after those wins, they lost the Gator Bowl to Notre Dame in a back and forth affair that you scored, I think, like 38 points in, but lost 45-38. And then last year in 2023, as it's well documented, you went 5-7 and took a step back. This year, you're 3-2, but you're coming off one of the worst losses of the year when you lost 27-3 against Ole Miss and had no answers on offense. So I don't know what to make of Beamer's tenure. There's been ups and downs, certainly, a lot of highs and lows. Right now, I don't know what to say. They are similar. I don't know if there is too much of a difference. I hate to say that, but it's kind of true. Now, the one thing I will say for Beamer is that he didn't finish with any 2-win seasons in his tenure like Muschamp did in that COVID year in 2020 when he got fired, late in the year. But I will say, just to kind of answer the question here, I feel like there's not too much of a difference with where they are. But I will say, recruiting-wise, it's similar, but I feel like there's a lot more of a positive outlook for what things are looking like now. Like I think things are heading the right direction. Again, it just takes time to build a program and stuff. And there's still a long way to go in the season. Like Beamer could very well pull off an upset win over Alabama this weekend. And we're talking about things completely differently right now. And the season's back on track and you're getting closer and closer to bowl eligibility and stuff. So I think this is a conversation we need to have probably after the season. If by some reason South Carolina doesn't make a bowl game this year and has another losing season, then we can have this conversation for sure. But for right now, it's similar. But I think it's still a little early to call them the exact same. But I do think South Carolina, despite all of its issues, it's on the right track in terms of recruiting mainly, and they've got some talent on the field. It's just about, okay, can you finally get it going on offense? Can you be consistent? I think is the key. And then let's get into the second part of this question from FA.cock, who asks, also, I think it's pretty evident that Sellers isn't ready to be a starting quarterback yet in the SEC. Surely our coaches saw this in practices during his near 2 years on campus. Why don't you think they were willing to promise a transfer quarterback the starting spot knowing this? Or do you think they had no clue he was this not ready? Yeah, and honestly, I'll go back to last year. Look, Sellers didn't play much, but when he did, he was great. And so that gave you a lot of optimism, like, hey, this guy's going to be really good. And yeah, it came in garbage time in most cases, but he still looked really good at quarterback. And the things we heard about him in practice and stuff as the scout team quarterback, he was looking really good. I'll never forget the way Clayton White talked about him. I think it was the week of the Vanderbilt game when you had to prepare for like 3 different quarterbacks, and Sellers is giving you the best look possible at every different style of their quarterbacks at Vanderbilt last year. And so there's a lot of optimism, and I don't blame Shane Beamer for not promising anyone the starting job, especially a transfer quarterback that you don't know too much about yet other than what you've seen on the tape. And look, life is not about handouts. I will say that not promising a guy the starting job in the portal, I get it. It's not a bad idea. I think it sets a bad precedent that like if Beamer promised the guy the starting job and then he didn't get it and stuff, it'd create a whole like can of issues. So I get it from that standpoint. And to kind of answer the question, I think they knew he was ready for. Otherwise, like they wouldn't have named him the starter if he wasn't ready. It's just there's going to be rough patches, especially in that first year as an SEC start. Spencer Rattler went through his share of rough patches in his first year at South Carolina, and look how he ended up being by year two. So the point is, like Sellers is struggling right now, but let's give him a little bit more time. He's only made 4 starts at the college level. If this is an issue by, let's say, like if he's struggling like in the Wofford game or something, or Vanderbilt or sometime in November, and he's just not showing any signs of progress, then it's a little bit more concerning. But we're only 4 games into this, and he's shown some good signs. So I wouldn't be too worried about him. And so that leads right into the next question here. And we're going to skip forward a little bit because we have another question about Lenore Sellers and just the overall quarterback room in general. It comes from GSGP69, who says, Sellers is not a good QB at this point. ODU, Ole Miss, he stunk the place up. Kentucky, the defense won the game. He limited errors. Look at every game he's played. He's had negative yard plays, several. He will get out of the pocket, but run out of bounds, losing yards or getting sacked. He doesn't understand to throw it away before losing yards. Perfect example. We took 2 plays for loss. Then we missed the field goal. Ran out of bounds twice in a row instead of throwing it away. Why don't they give the guy from Oklahoma a chance? He's tall, good arm, quick release. Both QBs who have started lose the ball far too often. Try someone else. Why didn't Beamer promise a quality QB a starting position? Yeah. And like I said before, I'm not going to kind of go back right through what I said before in the last question, but there's like, why promise a guy a starting job? Like, that's just, you have Lenore Sellers in the waiting. Like I said before, you saw so many good things from him last year that made you feel like, okay, this guy can definitely be your starting quarterback. Why promise the job to someone else when, it's all like competition makes guys better. So I think that's what I'm getting at here is that why promise a guy a starting job right away when, let's say they brought in, I'm trying to think, like AJ Swan, for example, from Vanderbilt. Let's say they brought him in, or KJ Jefferson, and you promise them the job and then they stink it up in fall camp. And then you're kind of left with, okay, like if Sellers outplays them in fall camp, going to give Sellers the starting job, right? Like, and that just sets a bad precedent that you don't promise a guy a starting job for those kinds of reasons, right? And I don't think it's a good idea to do that right out of the gate. Now, I will say Sellers' play hasn't been outstanding by any means. He's shown flashes. He's also had some rough moments. I will say this, though. You got to continue to rock with him. And this question brought up was also about why not give Davis Bevel a chance? Because Robbie Ashford and Lenore Sellers have turned the ball over too much and they, fumble it too much. I get that. At the same time, Bevel's sample size is a touchdown thrown in the 4th quarter against Akron. How do you think he would do against an SEC defense? We have no sample size of how he would do against that type of defense. Yeah, he comes from Oklahoma and he played a little bit there. And yeah, he played at Pitt too. But at the same time, it's like it's different coming into the SEC and playing against this level of competition. I just don't know how it would go. You got to give Sellers more time is what I'm getting at here. I'm not going to go right back through everything I just pointed out before, but you got to give him more time, in my opinion. And if this is an issue, like I said before, let's say in November and stuff, that's a different story. But right now, I think things are just you gotta give it a little bit more time. He's only made 4 starts, like I said. Next question comes from Black Death, who asks, "What is Shane Beamer's buyout?" Yeah, so if he were fired without cause, and this is from an article I read on ESPN, if he were fired without cause, the University of South Carolina would owe him 65% of the guaranteed compensation remaining on his contract. So hope that answers the question for you there. And our final question of the week comes from Randy E12, who asks, "Hi, Jack. Bama is favored by 22. Wow. No respect. So let's throw the kitchen sink at them and turn our D loose on Milrow. Can we get Matthew Fuller on the field next week, please? Go Cox. Shock the world. If Vandy can beat them, why not us? Their D isn't elite." Yeah, you would definitely be right about Alabama's defense not being as good as maybe some people thought. And look, giving up 40 points against Vanderbilt is nothing to write home about. That is not good enough if you're Alabama, because we've been so used to the Crimson Tide being that elite defense, especially under Nick Saban. But times are different now because Kalen DeBoer is in his first year with the Crimson Tide, taking over for the GOAT of all college football coaches. And to DeBoer's credit, he's had some really good wins this year. Went on the road to Madison, beat Wisconsin handedly. And then the week or 2 weeks later, after the bye week, you played Georgia in Bryant-Denny, huge game, college game day in town, all the eyes of the college football world on that game, and you picked up a win. It wasn't the prettiest win because you kind of let things fall apart there in the second half, but you did enough good things to win that game, and you probably have the best win of any team in college football right now. And that's obviously going to change as the year goes on because there's so many other good matchups to look forward to. But for right now, I think Alabama has the best win. However, they also have the worst loss of the season because they lost 40-35 against Vanderbilt in Nashville over the weekend. And that was just an abysmal performance from the Crimson Tide. You expect so much more from them. And I think it's safe to say if Nick Saban were still around with the Crimson Tide coaching and stuff, that wouldn't have happened because look, the preparation is always there. I have a feeling Alabama maybe overlooked Vanderbilt a little bit, but give credit to the Doors, man. They came out and played. Diego Pavia had a great game. They just made some really big plays. They went like 12 of 18 on third down. They dominated the time possession. They didn't go 3 and out in that game. So they had a lot of success in that game, and it's not a fluke because they led for the entire game. So it's just they caught Alabama on the wrong day, and that you got to move on if you're the Crimson Tide, and that's exactly what they're going to do because they're going to be coming into this game against South Carolina, who gets to play them on Saturday, probably pissed off, ready to make a statement and show that they are going to be fine, and they're still very much in the college football playoff race. Like, again, as long as they don't suffer another ugly loss, like if they lose to South Carolina this weekend, I think it's a different story. But as long as Alabama plays Alabama football and gets back to what they're good at, I think they're going to be fine. Now, to answer the question, there is no respect thrown for South Carolina. And why should there be? Because, you just suffered a really ugly loss to Ole Miss and you showed nothing on offense. And the defense played pretty well. Not great, but good enough to keep you in the ball game. But you made so many mistakes, the penalties, the coaching decisions, your offense stunk. So there's not much reason to feel good about South Carolina right now. And I can see why Bama's favored by a lot of points in this game because, again, it's in Tuscaloosa. It's at Bryant-Denny. This is still Alabama after all. It's not like we're that far removed from when Saban was the head coach and stuff. And we're not far removed at all from when Bama beat Georgia 2 weeks ago. So things can change. It's a week-by-week thing here. But I will say there's no respect for South Carolina, and maybe they use that to their advantage. Who knows? The other part of the question here, Matthew Fuller. I would like to see him get more touches too, especially if Rocket Sanders isn't like 100%. Like he really didn't look that way in the Ole Miss game with only a couple touches here and there. Had a nice run or two, but nothing like we normally would see from Rocket. But so far this year, Matthew Fuller, 8 carries, 25 yards. He's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. I think the biggest thing with Fuller is, do you want to exercise his red shirt, right? He's already played in one game this year against Akron. He's been on the travel roster for all of these games so far on the road for South Carolina. I do wonder if that is going to continue. Like, do you exercise his red shirt or not? Or do you let him play? And I think they will let him play because if Rocket isn't fully being Rocket or if he's hurt or whatever, I don't feel super confident about the other guys in that running back room. I think it's more so the fact that Dowell Loggins in that offense just hasn't utilized some of the running back strengths to their advantage. And I think a guy like Matthew Fuller deserves to get some touches, but we'll have to see. He's definitely not at the top of the pecking order because you got guys like Oscar Attaway, Juju McDowell ahead of him. But it would be cool to see, and Jawarren Howell, it would be cool to see Matthew Fuller get some more touches because I do think eventually he's going to be a very good running back for this program. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of Jack's Mailbag. A little bit of a longer episode, but it was good to get a lot more questions. So I appreciate you guys for asking any and all questions that you have. Speaking of which, if you have a question, like I said before at the beginning of the video, if you have a question you want to answer on next week's episode, be sure to drop a comment in the comment section below on this YouTube video, or I'll have a post on the Insiders Forum on GamecockCentral.com where you can ask any and all of your questions that you may have. South Carolina hits the road for the beginning of a 2-game road trip starting in Tuscaloosa against Alabama on Saturday. Kickoff is at noon on ABC. Look, Alabama's going to be favored heavily in that game, obviously, and South Carolina's coming off a really bad loss, but it's a great opportunity for the Gamecocks to pick up what would be, if they can win, the biggest win of the Shane Beamer era by far. So be sure to give this video a thumbs up. And like I said before, if you have any questions, ask as many as you want, and I will see you guys on next week's episode. Thanks for asking all your questions, and I'll see you then. Bye.